Hi, welcome to Exploring the Illusion of Free Will. My name is George Ortega, and this is episode number 138, Free Will, Why We Don't Even Experience It, a review. Okay, and we're taping this on October 7th, 2013. And it's a review because I covered this topic as the fifth episode of my show back in, I'm thinking it was like the end of 2011. It might actually have been the beginning of 2012, but it was a while back. So I'm reviewing it again because it's important. Because like what happens is people say, of course I have free will. I experience my will as being free. This show is about now. No, you don't experience your will as being free. You just think you do. It's a mistake. That's the illusion. Okay? So before we get into that, I basically want to define what most people mean when they say they have a free will. And then I guess quickly just like refute it, might as well. All right, when people say they have a free will, they say that what they do, think, feel, say is up to them, and nothing that's not in their control is either making them do those things or is taking part in the decision. Now, this taking part thing is important because some people will claim, yeah, I've got I don't have a complete free will, but I take part in at least part of my decisions, apart from this other stuff that I can't control. I'm going to demonstrate right now how that we don't even, that's not really free will. Okay, for example, let's say my right hand is our conscious mind, okay? The right hand decides I'm going to lift these papers, okay? And I'm going to do it of my free will. Now, for this example, the right hand is saying it's doing it completely on its own, okay? Of its own free will, okay? Now, my left hand is our unconscious, okay? Now, the unconscious is always awake. It never is asleep, and it's actually, as I've explained in a lot of other shows, it's where all the data is for our decisions, so it's really like what makes a decision. So anyway, what happens is the unconscious is always a part of us. So anyway, if the conscious mind decides I'm going to lift this paper, on my own, of my own free will, but the unconscious mind is saying, no, I'm going to be part of this decision to lift it, and I'm going to be part of lifting it also, my right hand, my conscious mind, can no longer say that it's doing it of its own free will, because this part of the mind, this unconscious, that the conscious mind isn't even aware of, is both taking part in the decision and taking part in the lifting of the action, whatever. All right, so that's a way to describe why we don't even have any degree of free will. And some people say, well, not all of our thoughts are freely willed, but some of them are. Again, because we have this unconscious that's always awake, always taking part in our decisions, you could never claim with any degree of certainty, well, this was a freely willed decision, because you have no idea what the unconscious is doing. There's other reasons why even we can't make a free will decision at any time, like causality. Actually, let's get into that. The other main reason why free will is impossible, it's causality, is because everything has a cause. If you make a decision, okay, there's going to be a cause for that decision. And the cause is going to precede the decision, because a cause will always precede its effect. But the thing is that everything has a cause. So there's going to be a cause to that cause. And then there's going to be a cause to the cause of that cause, and a cause to that cause, and that cause. So you have these causes regressing back in time, cause by cause. It's a cause and effect chain. And they go back in time, moment by moment, because again, a cause can never follow its effect. It's always got to precede it. And so this chain of cause and effect is traveling back in time, moment by moment, whatever. You could describe it physically in terms of particles, whatever. But it's going back to before we're born, before the planet was created, before the solar system was created, all the way back to the Big Bang. All right, that's why, every decision we make is not freely willed. It's not up to us. It's up to the Big Bang that initiated this entire causal process. All right, brief explanation of why we don't have free will. Now let's get into, before that, let's get into why this is so important. This is important because, to the extent we believe we have a free will, and we attribute a free will to other people and to ourselves, we'll blame other people and ourselves. To the extent we blame other people and ourselves, we'll get angry at other people and ourselves. To the extent we get angry at other people and ourselves, we will seek to punish other people and ourselves, to the extent we seek to punish other people and ourselves, we're creating unnecessary pain, unnecessary suffering, unnecessary conflict, unnecessary aggression, vengeance, revenge. It's an insane belief. I mean, aside from that, I mean, just the entire belief in free will is completely insane. We have our whole world it's founded on this illusion, on this insanity. That can't be good. But essentially, in our personal lives, it causes problems, okay? Now, I'm not saying that we're going to do away with rules and laws and morality and stuff. We have to, quote-unquote, assume. We don't have to assume that people have free will. If somebody does something, we simply have to identify that whatever is happening through them. So yeah, we might have to resort to a kind of like operant conditioning. Like in psychology, operant conditioning is when you condition favorable, desirable behaviors through reward or punishment, okay? So we might have to reward or punish people, to encourage them and ourselves to do certain behaviors and not do others. But we would, under the free will perspective, we're doing it with hatred, with anger, with recriminations and accusations and aggression and all that. It brings this element of hostility into it. Whereas, like, when we overcome that, when we understand that absolutely nothing that happens in the world, nothing that we ever think, say, feel, and do is in any way up to us, fine, we'll still have to, use punishment to a certain extent as a deterrent and as a rehabilitative mechanism, whatever, but we'll do it with much more compassion and understanding and intelligence. And because we're doing it with much more intelligence, it's going to be more effective. For example, with criminals, the free will perspective says, well, they're evil, they're bad, they're criminals. And the problem with that is, to the extent we believe it, they believe it. If they believe it in psychology, you understand that, like, a lot of times what we do arises from our self-concept. In other words, these criminals, they're saying to themselves, well, my parents told me I'm evil, I'm bad. Now society's telling me I'm a criminal, I'm evil. So I must be a criminal. What do criminals do? Criminals do crime. So, like, in other words, free will belief perpetuates a kind of crime in the world that's derived from this, like, false self-image that these criminals have, these people have, that is derived from this insane, insidious, harmful free will belief. Okay, that's one reason why this is important. All right, let's get to the topic. Okay, now I should focus on this stuff, why it's important a lot more, because most people, a lot of people, get rationally, scientifically, that free will is absolutely impossible, but they're afraid to admit it. They're afraid to allow themselves to accept it because they're afraid, oh, well, if everybody believes that free will is an illusion, there will be anarchy. It'll spell the end of civilization. It won't. And I've gotten into it in other shows, and I don't have time to get into it now, but believe me, we will still uphold rules of law and order. It'll just be a much more wonderful world, amazing, because it'll be a brand new consciousness for everyone. All right, so we claim that we experience free will. A lot of people say, of course I have free will. I experience my will as being free. No, it's not an experience. First of all, it's a belief. Okay, the free will is a belief. And how are we taught this belief? Very early in life, either through the church sometimes, but more so through our parents or other adults. They'll say to us, well, you did this. You took that cookie from the cookie jar and you did it of your own free will and it was wrong. You can't blame your brother. You can't blame whatever. You did it of your own free will. Nothing made you do it, okay? That's what we're taught from a very early age, because that's the rationale our parents use for punishing us. And I'm not saying it's completely wrong for parents to punish kids. It's not wrong for parents to punish kids, when they do wrong, because that's how they, learn right. I mean, it's better when, so it's necessary sometimes. But, that's how people learn the concept of free will. When they're a little older, they go to church. And free will, which actually, incidentally, isn't even in the Bible. The term wasn't coined until about 380 AD, and it wasn't adopted by the church until about 500 AD as a principle. But nowadays the church tells you, of course you have free will, because if you didn't have a free will, God couldn't condemn you to eternal suffering for the rest of eternity. God, if you didn't have a free will, there would be no justification for hell. God couldn't, in good conscience, condemn some people, to hell for the rest of eternity if you didn't have free will. That's the reasoning. People learn that. Okay, what happens is, though, people learn this, and sometimes these kids are like, 6, 7 years old, they learn this stuff, and they say, if you don't believe what the church or, synagogues or temples or mosques or whatever tell you, your risk is of spending the rest of eternity, which is like trillions and trillions of years. It never stops. It never ends. Suffering unbearable sufferings. And a lot of people have described this hellfires. It's like suffering that's extreme and ceaseless. Okay, when you're a little kid and you're taught that, you're probably going to say, I'm going to hedge my bets here. I better believe in this free will stuff because I don't want to take any chances. All right? So it's kind of like blackmail. These little kids, these 6, 7-year-olds, they don't even have the cognitive abilities to be able to interpret this kind of information, with any kind of reasoning. It's like brainwashing. So anyway, my point is that, this idea of free will that some of us say we experience, we don't experience it, okay? It's something we're taught. And to the extent we're not taught it, because sometimes, some people will say, well, sure, it might have been something I've been taught, but I could have I could have concluded that I have a free will. And that's actually what happens. Sometimes, in other words, people say, well, wait a minute. What I'm thinking, it doesn't seem like anything that's not in my control is making me do something, so it must be my free will. But that's a very, very shallow, very cursory non-exploration of the topic or of the question. Because in other words, people say, well, it feels like I have a free will. I am experiencing that I have a free will. So I must have a free will, but they never actually delve into the question. Because, first of all, the question is, what would your will be free of, okay? Are you saying that you concluded that your will is free from your unconscious? Did you make that analysis? Did you make that deduction? You concluded that you have a free will because you concluded that your will is free from the unconscious? Your will is not free from the unconscious, all right? Because the unconscious is taking part in every decision you make, as I explained earlier. Did you conclude that your will is free of factors that are outside of your control, like how you were raised, like what language you learned, like where you were born, like when you were born, like whether you're a man or a woman, all your genetics and all? You didn't conclude that, all right? So the notion, some people say, well, all right, basically, it is a conclusion. It's not an experience. It's kind of a conclusion, or it's something you're taught. But to the extent that it's a conclusion based on a lack of consideration. If you consider the question with any kind of depth, with any kind of analysis, you have to conclude rationally, logically, scientifically that there's absolutely no way you have a free will. You can't. So it's a conclusion. It's a conclusion based on faulty analysis. Okay. So what happens? What do we do? What do we experience? What we experience is choosing, okay? We experience, we make choices. That's what we experience. If I'm going to decide what to have for dessert and it's between an apple and an orange, I might decide on an apple one day. I might decide on an orange one day. We make choices all the time, but these choices are not made free of factors that are not in our control. That's the key. If we had a free will, we would make them free of factors that are not in our control, but obviously we don't. So anyway, the key point here is it's not that we choose freely. We don't experience a free will. We don't experience our choices as being free from things that are not in our control. We simply experience choosing. Okay? For example, do we experience our choices as free from causality, from this causal process? Because sometimes, the idea of free will is completely incoherent because, like, in order to have a free will, it would have to be free of the process of causality or free of causes. It'd have to be up to us, but it couldn't be caused, because if it was caused, that invites this causal regression, these causal antecedents, because everything must have a cause that span back to before we were born. So basically, like, the free will belief is saying that we caused it, that our will caused it, but it couldn't have caused it, because if it caused it, it can't be free because of this causal regression. I hope you understood that. All right. Again, we experience choosing. We don't experience our choosing as free from our genetics. Okay? We don't even because we don't consider that, whatever. We don't experience our choosing as being free from our past experiences and all. Because in other words, if I choose an apple and instead of an orange, my past experience told me, well, an apple tastes a certain way, an orange tastes a certain way. All right, this is part of my memory. So we don't experience, a will that is free from these memories. And again, these memories reside in our unconscious. So this choice between an apple and an orange is actually being made at the level of the unconscious, because if the data by which I'm making the decision is at the level of unconscious, the choice has to be made at the level of unconscious. And I just wanted to explain. Some people will say, well, our conscious mind has access to the unconscious. It doesn't. It doesn't. In other words, like, that's why we call it the unconscious. And here's how it works, just very briefly. When I'm perceiving that apple and the orange, it's not just my conscious mind that is perceiving these two fruits. It's my unconscious. Okay, my unconscious is also, in other words, there's a lot of experiments in psychology that demonstrate that when you're looking at something, your unconscious is not just conscious of what you're conscious of, what you're aware of. Your unconscious is also perceiving stuff that our conscious mind is not aware of. The unconscious is aware of not just what the conscious mind is aware of, but a lot more. So essentially, the answer to this, why we're not consciously choosing between an apple and an orange, it's because our unconscious is aware of the apple and orange, and it's choosing for us, because that's where the data, that's where the taste, the preferences, all this stuff is happening. All right. So yeah, I mean, we don't experience free will. We just assume we have a free will because we just never question it. It's something we never question. We never question, like, did something happen that we just never question. Okay. Yeah, and we don't question. For example, if we were to question, we'd say, like, well, why did I choose the apple instead of the orange? I might say, well, I felt like it, and then then you ask yourself, well, why did you feel like that, like an apple instead of an orange? You might say, well, because I had an orange yesterday, so I felt the need for something different. And then you might ask, why did you feel the need for something different? And you might say, well, because I like variety. Variety is the spice of life, and, I like variety. And then you ask yourself, why do you like variety? And you might say, well, because at a certain point, you don't know. So that's a good way to explain it. If you ask why you did something, and you keep asking why, at a certain point you might say, well, that's the way I was raised, that's the way I was born, that's the way I was made up, that's who I am. And that's right. But you didn't make yourself, you didn't raise yourself, you didn't make yourself who you are and how you are. And that's why you don't have free will. That's why you don't choose freely, and that's why you don't even experience, the will as being free. All right. I want to get back to this idea that, free will is for the most part, a religious concept. In Christianity, it's not in the Bible. The Bible sometimes refers to choosing, but, for example, as Paul wrote in Romans 7:15, he said, I don't know what's going on here. I want to do what's right, but sometimes I can't. Sometimes I do the things that I hate. That's Romans 7:15. So Paul in Romans is actually explaining that he doesn't have a free will. Now, Romans isn't the only passage. There's other passages in different books, both the Old Testament and the New, where God is saying, I choose. I choose what's happening. I'm. The what you do is up to me. All right, so basically, choice is sometimes in the Bible, but free choice or free will isn't in the Bible. The term was coined in 380 A.D. by Augustine, as I said before, and it became part of Christian doctrine. I think about 500 A.D. That's when they said, well, all right, this is like, we like this idea. We're going to incorporate it into the fundamental beliefs, because before that it wasn't really a sanctioned church doctrine, whatever. Okay. So again, these people back then, they said, well, and back then, they were like, if you didn't believe what they believed, they would excommunicate you. I don't know, sometimes they would kill you, or imprison you and stuff. This guy, Galileo, was threatened with death. This guy who also understood the universe right, Bruni or something, he was actually killed by these Christians. So they weren't fooling around. You don't believe what they believe. They were so. It was like brainwashing. It was extortion. It was like people didn't have a choice of whether to believe in free will or not. If the church believed in, you were in danger if you didn't believe it. So that's so basically, essentially, people were taught. We were taught, but they didn't experience their will as free. All right. What else? Okay. So, free will is a belief. It's a belief like evolution. It's not something they experience. We don't experience evolution. We have no idea of what, we're taught that evolution is the way things happen, and it makes sense. There's a lot of scientific evidence about it, but it's not, evolution is, all right, for most of us, evolution is kind of like a belief that we're taught. If you're a scientist, it's not a belief, it's an understanding. But for most of us, we take it for granted. But basically, it's kind of free will is a belief. It's kind of more like a belief like the Earth is flat. Okay, a long time ago, everybody believed the Earth was flat. It's a belief. It's not an experience. I mean, we can say we can experience the world as flat, relatively. And so, I guess, yeah, in that sense, we're experiencing the world as flat. Whatever. It's kind of like a better belief. These aren't good examples. A better belief is kind of like the world, being 5,700 and some years old. I'm 50 years old, 60 years old, whatever. Almost 6,000 years old. If you add up the biblical chronology starting from Adam and Eve, that's how many years you come up with. That's a belief. We don't experience that. We don't experience the world as being just 6,000 years old. We don't experience how old it is, okay? But it's just a belief. Free will is a belief like that, okay? We're taught it. Okay, now, it is possible, we don't experience this illusion of free will. It is possible to overcome the illusion, because even though we don't experience our will as free, we believe it's free, and that belief is a very, very powerful conditioner, and it just basically controls our reactions to what happens. But it is possible to overcome this belief, and overcoming it is really simple. It really amounts to anytime you kind of are evaluating or judging the actions of someone else or of yourself. If you're reading something, watching TV or something, all you have to do is remind yourself, wait a minute, what that person just said, what that person just wrote, what that person just did was in no way up to them. It was not freely willed. That's what overcoming the belief in free will is. That's how you do it. That's how, that's all you need to do. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. It's not as easy in emotional situations. Sometimes, if you're involved in an emotional conflict or something, your emotions kick in, and, this free will belief, this free will teaching that we've been taught and we don't experience and we accept is very, very ingrained in us. It's difficult in emotional situations to overcome this belief, okay? And, most fundamentally, if you're trying to do this on your own, you will succeed some. I've succeeded to a certain extent. Susan Blackmore, who's a British psychologist who understands free will as an illusion, she's succeeded this to a great extent. She started, overcoming it years ago when she was in college, and she says she's had great success in it. So I believe her. It's possible to overcome this illusion of free will. Okay. It's easier sometimes like to overcome it when you are watching TV or when you're like, reading a newspaper. They say that somebody did something, a group of people are doing something, and your immediate reaction, oh, they're horrible, you want to punish them and all that stuff. Then you remind yourself, wait a minute, it's not up to them. So you still may feel they need to be punished or whatever because they're doing something wrong, it's harmful and wrong. But at least you won't be doing it from the perspective of hatred. It's really, it helps you, to do that. All right, so anyway, we're going to end. I've got like a bit under 2 minutes. So like Scientific American Mind in 2012 came out with an article refuting free will. And in it, it says that like about 30% of people in the world don't believe in free will. So obviously these 30, and I don't know where they are, I really don't, it's just a statement they make in that article, Scientific American Mind, okay, 2012. But they don't believe in free will. Now, if they don't believe in free will, I don't think they're experiencing their will as free, all right? So that's one thing. The Greeks didn't experience their will as free. The Greeks understood that it was the fates, these gods would determine things. These gods would determine what you did and what you didn't do. The Greeks understood this. The doctrine of karma understands this. The doctrine of karma understands that like what you're doing in this life is a result of what you did in the last life. But what you did in the last life is a result of what you did in the life before, and what you did in the life before is a result of what you did in the life before that. So you've got this chain of cause and effect taking the part of our lives in karma. So that's causality. And then finally, Albert Einstein didn't believe he had a free will. And he went on to win the Nobel Prize. So like you can do great things in life not believing in free will. You don't experience it. It's a belief that you've been taught, and it's illusion, and it's wrong. And all right, this is episode 138, I guess. So we're going to continue. I'm going to continue explaining why free will is impossible, because like with Darwin and evolution, it took years for people to accept it. So it may take years for people to accept this, but we'll keep doing the shows, and gradually, slowly, you'll get it, and the world will change because of it. All right, this is George Ortega saying thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time on Exploring Illusion Free Will. Thanks.